The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the low hum of tires on wet asphalt. Seoul's neon glow blurred past the tinted windows of the black car as Kim Min-Jae pressed harder on the accelerator. His jaw was clenched, his hands steady on the wheel, but his mind was a storm. In the passenger seat, Kiara slumped against the leather, her dark skin pale beneath the harsh glow of the dashboard lights. Blood seeped through the white shirt she wore, his shirt, and every drop felt like a countdown. He hated hospitals. They were nests of vulnerability, places where enemies could strike unseen. But tonight, he had no choice. The bullet had torn into her arm, and though she was still breathing, her breaths were shallow, uneven. He had carried countless bodies in his life, but never had one felt so fragile in his arms. Kiara drifted in and out of consciousness. The pain was sharp, but the greater weight was confusion. She remembered running, the taste of freedom on her tongue, the iron gates so close. Then the crack of a gunshot, the fire in her arm, the ground rushing up to meet her. Now she was trapped in a haze of blood and neon, her body swaying with the car's speed. She wanted to ask where she was, but her lips barely moved. "Stay awake," Min-Jae muttered, his voice low, almost a growl. He glanced at her, his dark eyes catching the faint reflection of passing streetlights. "Don't you dare close your eyes." Her head lolled toward him. She caught fragments of his face, sharp lines, a mouth set in grim determination. His voice was foreign, thick with an accent, but the command in it was universal. She wanted to tell him she wasn't weak, that she wasn't afraid, but the words dissolved before they reached her tongue. The car screeched to a halt outside a discreet private hospital tucked between high-rise buildings. No signs, no flashing lights, just a single door guarded by men who knew better than to ask questions. Min-Jae stepped out, his long coat swirling, and lifted Kiara into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Her head rested against his chest, and she felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat, strong and unyielding. Inside, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit her senses. White walls, polished floors, the faint echo of hurried footsteps. Doctors appeared, summoned by a single nod from Min-Jae. They spoke in rapid Korean, their words sharp and clipped. Kiara caught none of it, only the urgency in their tone. She was laid on a gurney, bright lights flooding her vision, hands pressing against her wound. Min-Jae stood at the edge of the chaos, his presence like a shadow that no one dared to ignore. His men waited outside, but he remained, his eyes never leaving her. He had seen blood before, too much of it, but this was different. This was not a soldier, not an enemy. This was a woman who had stumbled into his world, and now bled because of it. Kiara's mind floated. She heard voices, felt the sting of needles, the cold bite of metal instruments. Somewhere in the blur, she felt his gaze. It anchored her, pulled her back from the edge. She wanted to ask him why he cared, why he hadn't let her go. But darkness claimed her before she could speak. Hours passed. The doctors worked in silence, their movements efficient. When at last they stepped back, the wound was cleaned, stitched, bandaged. She would live. Min-Jae exhaled, a sound so quiet it was almost a sigh. He had not realized he had been holding his breath. He sat beside her bed as dawn threatened the horizon. The room was dim, the only light a soft glow from the machines that monitored her. She stirred, her lashes fluttering, and for the first time since the gunshot, her eyes opened fully. Confusion clouded them, but she was awake. "You're safe," Min-Jae said, his voice softer now, though still edged with steel. "But we leave soon." Her throat was dry, her voice a rasp. "Leave? She winced as pain shot through her arm. "I need to rest." His gaze hardened. "No. The longer you stay here, the more danger you're in. I won't let history repeat itself." She frowned, trying to focus on his words. "History?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You don't need to know." "Not yet." Kiara's heart pounded. She didn't understand him, didn't understand why he had saved her, why he stayed. But beneath his coldness, she sensed something else, fear not for himself, but for her. And that unsettled her more than the pain in her arm. The ride back to the penthouse was silent, but the silence was not peaceful. It was thick, heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Kiara sat in the back seat, her injured arm bandaged, her body weak but her mind racing. The city lights of Seoul flickered past the tinted windows, neon signs bleeding into the night like restless ghosts. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, trying to steady her breathing, trying to make sense of the man beside her. Kim Min-Jae sat rigid, his dark suit immaculate despite the chaos of the night. His profile was sharp, carved in shadow and light, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He hadn't spoken since they left the hospital. His silence was not indifference. It was control, the kind of control that made Kiara's skin prickle. She could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing against the air between them. When the car finally pulled into the underground garage of his penthouse, Kiara's heart sank. The building loomed above them, sleek and modern, its glass walls reflecting the city's glow. To her, it looked less like a home and more like a fortress. She wanted to run, but her body betrayed her, weak, trembling, still reeling from blood loss. She hated that she needed him, hated that he had saved her, hated that she was trapped in his world. Inside, the penthouse was vast and cold. Dark wood floors stretched beneath her bare feet, and the walls were lined with minimalist art, abstract, sharp, unfeeling. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and something metallic, like steel. It was beautiful, but it was not warm. It was a cage dressed in elegance. Min-Jae guided her to the living room, his hand firm on her back. She pulled away, glaring at him, but he ignored it. He motioned for her to sit on the leather sofa. She obeyed, not out of submission, but because her legs threatened to give way beneath her. For a long moment he stood before her, his arms crossed, his gaze unreadable. Then his mask cracked. "What were you thinking?" His voice was low, but the anger in it was unmistakable. "Running. Jumping from a window. Do you have any idea what could have happened?" Kiara's chin lifted, her eyes blazing despite her exhaustion. "What could have happened? I could have been free. I could have been away from you." His jaw tightened. "Free? You think freedom is waiting for you out there? You don't understand the world you've stepped into. The moment I carried you out of that club, your life stopped being your own." Her breath caught. The words were cruel, but there was no malice in them, only truth. Still, she refused to let him see her fear. "You don't own me," she spat. "I'm not your prisoner. You are alive because of me," he shot back, his voice rising. "And you are in danger because of me. That is the truth, whether you like it or not." The room seemed to shrink around them, the tension crackling like electricity. Kiara's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. "Then tell me," she demanded, her voice trembling but strong. "Tell me what you meant when you said I reminded you of her. Who is she?" For the first time, Min-Jae faltered. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something deeper, pain. He turned away, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Kiara leaned forward, her voice softer now, but insistent. Who was she? When he finally turned back to her, the icy mask he always wore was gone. For the first time, she saw not the Mafia Lord, not the untouchable man of shadows, but a human being. His eyes were haunted, his face etched with grief. "She was someone I couldn't protect," he said quietly. "And because of me, she died." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Kiara sat on the edge of the leather sofa, her bandaged arm resting against her lap, her eyes locked on him. She had demanded answers, and now she waited, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. Min-Jae stood by the tall window, his back to her, the Seoul skyline glittering behind him like 1,000 watchful eyes. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, tall, rigid, carved from shadow. For a long moment, he said nothing. His silence was louder than any words. Finally, he turned. His face was different now. The cold mask he always wore had slipped, and in its place was something raw, something human. His eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, were clouded with memory. "She was like you," he said quietly, his voice low, almost reluctant. "Strong, stubborn, beautiful. And she paid the price for being near me." Kiara's breath caught. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Who was she? He hesitated, his jaw tightening as if the words themselves were knives. Then, slowly, he crossed the room and sat across from her, his posture less rigid, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Her name was Amara," he said at last. "She was different. A black woman like you. She had fire in her eyes, the kind that made men stop and listen. She wasn't afraid of me. She wasn't afraid of anything." Kiara's chest tightened. She could hear the weight in his voice, the way he lingered on the memory. "She was caught in the crossfire," Min-Jae continued, his voice rougher now. "The Red Dragon Syndicate wanted to hurt me. They couldn't touch me directly, so they went after her. They killed her in front of me. And his voice broke for the first time, a crack in the armor. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save her." The room seemed to shrink around them. Kiara felt the air grow colder, the shadows deeper. She had expected arrogance, excuses, maybe even indifference. But what she saw instead was guilt, deep, unrelenting guilt that had carved itself into his soul. "That's why you said I reminded you of her," Kiara whispered. He looked up at her then, his eyes burning with something fierce and unguarded. "Yes. The moment I saw you, I knew. The way you move, the way you fight me, the way you refuse to bend. You are her all over again. And that terrifies me." Kiara's throat tightened. For the first time, she saw him not as the untouchable mafia lord, but as a man haunted by loss. A man who carried ghosts. But she was not Amara. She would not be. She straightened her back, her eyes narrowing as she fixed her gaze on him. "I'm not her," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "And I won't die because of you. I won't die because of anyone." Min-Jae's eyes flickered, a spark of anger flashing through the grief. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "This world doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't forgive weakness. You think you can fight it? You think you can survive it?" Kiara's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. "Then I'll fight," she shot back. "I won't be weak. I won't be a victim. If your world is as dangerous as you say, then teach me. Show me how to survive it." For a moment, silence stretched between them, sharp and tense. Min-Jae studied her, his dark eyes searching her face as if trying to decide whether she was serious. He had expected fear, submission, maybe even tears. But what he saw instead was fire. The same fire that had once drawn him to Amara. "You're reckless," he said finally, his voice softer now, though still edged with steel. "But you have fire, and fire can be shaped." He turned away, pacing slowly across the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "When you're healed, I'll train you myself. If you insist on surviving in my world, then you'll learn how to fight in it. But understand this. Once you step onto this path, there is no turning back." Kiara's lips curved into a faint, defiant smile. "Good. Because I don't plan on turning back." Min-Jae stopped, his back to her, his shoulders tense. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a quiet exhale, he nodded. So be it. That night, as Kiara lay in the vast bed of his penthouse, sleep refused to come. Her arm ached, her body was exhausted, but her mind was alive with thoughts. She replayed his words, his confession, his promise to train her. She thought of Amara, the woman who had died because of him, and she swore to herself that she would not share the same fate. She would fight, she would survive, and she would not let Kim Min-Jae, or anyone else, decide her destiny. But outside the walls of the penthouse, the city stirred with danger. The Red Dragon Syndicate was watching, waiting, and their war with Min-Jae was far from over. And Kiara, whether she liked it or not, was now part of that war. The following days went by in a blur with nothing specific happening. That afternoon, the penthouse was quiet, the kind of silence that echoes. Restless, Kiara wandered through the long hallways, her bare feet sinking into the thick rugs. She found herself drawn to a door she hadn't opened before. Inside was a study. The air smelled faintly of paper and ink. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, not just business or strategy, but novels, poetry, even art history. On the desk lay a sketchbook, its edges smudged with charcoal. Curiosity tugged at her. She opened it carefully. Inside were rough sketches, mountains, rivers, a quiet shoreline. The lines were strong but unpolished, as if drawn in stolen moments. She traced one with her finger, surprised. "You shouldn't be in here." His voice came from the doorway. She jumped, snapping the book shut. Kim Jae-won stood there, his tall frame filling the space, his expression unreadable. I didn't mean to pry," she said quickly. He stepped inside, his gaze flicking to the sketchbook. "I draw when I can't sleep," he said, his voice quieter than usual. She blinked. "You draw?" He gave a small shrug. "It clears the noise in my head." Something softened in her chest. "I paint," she admitted. "Nature. It makes me feel free." For a moment, the air between them shifted. They weren't captor and captive, but two artists, bound by the same need to create. His eyes lingered on her, and she felt the weight of his attention. Her pulse quickened. The moment stretched too long. She looked away first, her cheeks warm. That night, the quiet was broken. Kiara woke to a faint scrape, metal against metal. Her body tensed. She sat up, listening. A door creaked open. Someone was inside. Her heart raced. She slipped off the bed and into the closet, pressing herself against the wall, her breath shallow. Footsteps grew louder. A shadow moved across the floor. She saw the glint of a gun through the crack in the door. Her stomach clenched. The intruder stepped closer to the bed. Then the silence shattered. A gunshot rang out, deafening. The shadow crumpled, falling hard. The door burst open. Kim Jae-won strode in, his gun still smoking, his face carved in fury. His men followed, shouting in Korean, sweeping the room. His eyes found her in the closet. For a moment, relief flickered across his face. Then he crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her out. His hands gripped her shoulders, firm, steady. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, urgent. She shook her head, trembling. His hands stayed on her shoulders, his face close to hers. She could see the tension in his jaw, the fire in his eyes. The same hands that had sketched rivers had just pulled the trigger without hesitation. Her breath caught. He was too close. She could feel his warmth, smell the faint sandalwood on his skin. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The air between them thickened, charged. She felt herself leaning in, drawn by something she couldn't fight. But then he pulled back, his expression hardening. "This is why you can't run," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "They will come for you. Always." He released her, turning away. The moment was gone, but the storm inside her remained. Kiara pressed a hand to her chest, her pulse racing. She remembered the sketchbook, the quiet drawings. He was both the artist and the killer, and she needed to understand both if she was to survive. The incident left Kiara shaken. Time passed slowly in the penthouse. Days blurred into nights, and Kiara's arm, once raw with pain, began to heal. The bandages were changed daily, the wound cleaned with quiet efficiency by Min-Jae's private doctor. At first, she hated the stillness, and hated being forced to rest. But as the weeks went on, she found herself watching the rhythms of the house, and of the man who ruled it. Min-Jae was always in motion. Meetings in hushed Korean with his men, phone calls that stretched late into the night, the constant presence of guards moving like shadows. Yet he always found time to check on her. Sometimes it was only a glance, a short question. "Does it hurt? Or did you eat?" But it was enough to remind her that he was watching. She began to notice the small things. The way he loosened his tie the moment he stepped inside, as if shedding the weight of the outside world. The way he stood at the window every evening, staring out at the city as though it were both his kingdom and his prison. The way his voice softened, just slightly, when he spoke to her compared to the clipped commands he gave his men. And she noticed something else. She no longer felt like a stranger in his world. She was still trapped, yes, but she was learning its shape. One evening, when the stitches had been removed and her arm was strong enough to move without pain, Min-Jae appeared in the doorway of her room. He wore simple clothes, black trousers, a fitted shirt, but his presence was as commanding as ever. "It's time," he said. She frowned. "Time for what?" "For you to stop being helpless." He led her to a wide, empty room on the lower floor of the penthouse. The floor was polished wood, the walls bare except for a single mirror. It looked like a training hall, though she had never noticed it before. She obeyed, her heart racing. "First rule," he said, circling her slowly. "Never freeze. Fear will make you hesitate. Hesitation will kill you." She swallowed hard. "And the second rule?" His eyes locked on hers. "Fight until you can't breathe. Fight until you can't stand. Only then do you stop." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "Show me how you would defend yourself." She raised her fists awkwardly, copying what she had seen in movies. He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "Wrong." Before she could react, he stepped forward, his hand darting out to grab her wrist. She gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip was firm. "Use your body," he said. "Not just your arms. Twist. Break free." She tried again, twisting her body sharply. This time, his grip loosened, and she stumbled back, breathless. A faint smile touched his lips. Better. The days that followed were grueling. Min-Jae trained her every morning, his patience thin but his focus absolute. He taught her how to stand, how to strike, how to use her size and speed instead of fighting against them. "Your strength is not in power," he told her one morning, his voice low as he adjusted her stance. His hands brushed her hips, guiding her movement. The touch was professional, but her skin burned where his fingers lingered. "Your strength is in precision. Aim for the weak points. Eyes. Throat. Knees." She nodded, her breath catching. They sparred often, their bodies colliding, the sound of their movements echoing in the empty room. Each time she fell, he made her stand again. Each time she faltered, he pushed her harder. And yet, beneath the harshness, there was something else. A strange kind of care. He never let her fall too hard. He never let her give up. At night, her muscles ached, but her spirit felt stronger. For the first time since arriving in Seoul, she felt like she was taking control of her life again. One evening, after a particularly brutal session, Min-Jae placed a small black pistol in her hands. Her stomach dropped. "You can't be serious." His gaze was steady. "This world doesn't care about your fear. If you want to survive, you need to know how to use this." Her hands trembled as she held it. The weight was heavier than she expected. "Breathe," he said, stepping behind her. His chest brushed her back, his hands covering hers as he guided her grip. "Steady. Don't fight the weight. Control it." She could feel his breath against her ear, warm and steady. Her pulse raced. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with something unspoken. "Now," he whispered. "Aim." She raised the gun, her hands shaking less under his guidance. She pulled the trigger. The sound exploded in her ears, the recoil jolting her arms. She gasped, but he steadied her, his hands firm on hers. "Again," he said softly. The training grew more intense. Their bodies collided, their breaths mingled, the air between them charged. Every touch, every correction, every moment of closeness built a tension that neither of them spoke of. One evening, after hours of sparring, she stumbled, nearly falling. He caught her, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her against him. For a moment they froze. Her face was inches from his, her breath mingling with his. His eyes locked on hers, dark and unreadable, but filled with something she couldn't deny. Her lips parted. His gaze dropped to them. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then slowly, inevitably, he leaned in. Their lips met, brief but electric. A spark shot through her, fierce and undeniable. She pulled back first, her chest heaving, her mind spinning. He stepped back, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed. "This is dangerous," he said, his voice rough. She swallowed hard. "Everything about you is dangerous." And with that, episode 2 comes to an end. Tell me what you think about Kiara stepping fully into Kim Jae-won's world. Do not forget to subscribe so as to be notified when episode 3 drops tomorrow. Thank you for watching.